Let's do this. All right, we are live. Welcome again to our weekly webinar. My name is Blake Choisnet. A lot of you guys know me. We've connected a lot before. But here's the deal. Here's what I want to do today. I want to tell you how to discern between a good deal and a bad deal. That's my goal. By the end of this, I want you to be able to know how to determine a good deal from a bad deal. Okay. Again, my name is Blake Choisnet. I'm a real estate investor and investing coach. I'm a professional investor myself. I went from being a burnt out 9 to 5er to retired at 32 after building a multi-million-dollar portfolio in 18 months. And I want to teach you how to do it too. I want to teach you how to do that yourself so you've got the freedom of your time, of your money, your finances, your relationships, and you're able to do what you want with your time. That's what I want for you. So I want to teach you how you can decide between whether a deal is good or bad. And there's one metric that you need to know. There's one metric that's made up of two numbers. Okay, so I want to teach you that by the end of this, you should be able to know how to determine a good deal from a bad deal. Okay, but first we've got to start with the end in mind, right? Whether a deal is good or bad depends on what your goals are, right? So we are starting first and foremost with the goal of cash flow. So our goal in investing in real estate is cash flow oriented. Now, you might say passive income, you might say financial independence or financial freedom, whatever you mean, that's the goal. That's what we're looking for is cash flow. Cash flow and passive income is an end toward financial independence, financial wellness, financial freedom. That's what we're shooting for. Okay, so that's the first goal. And what we have to do is be able to understand what our goal is and then understand what our obstacles are on our way to that goal. Okay, so given our own constraints, we have to be able to understand what are the best mechanisms for us to be able to pursue that goal, the best strategy or methods. Okay, so I want to talk through just a few main constraints that people are going to have, the main constraints that you might run into and probably find yourself running into when you ask the question, how can I build passive income so I can be financially free? Okay, the two main constraints are time and money. Okay, you really get to pick one of these. If you've got a bunch of money, great. You don't have to put as much time in. If you've got a bunch of time and no money, there's still hope. That's fine. But what you can't say is, well, I don't have any time and I don't have any money and I want to be financially free. You've got to pick. Okay, now if you've got a lot of time and a lot of money, you're in a good situation because you can determine what schedule or what strategy rather implementation works best for you. Okay, so let's first start with time. Essentially, what I hear a lot when I talk to people about this, one of the two main constraints is I don't have the time to do that. Okay, so when you say I don't have the time to do that, sometimes you're making an assumption in the back of your head, and the assumption in the back of your head is, well, I don't have 30 hours a week to be investing in real estate or analyzing deals or raising private money or managing rehabs remotely. What I want to help you understand is how much time it actually takes. I think that with a reasonable level of investment, say 4 to 6 hours a week, you can be getting a house every 3 months. Once you know the process, a house every 3 months, that's very doable. That's with the Burr model because you can recycle money. But a house every 3 months, 4 to 6 hours a week, not a big deal. Not a big deal. Now, what it does require you to do is understand what your main priorities are in life. I think each of us individually have anywhere between 3 and 5 main priorities in our lives that we can actually prioritize. Give the intellectual capacity and emotional capacity that are actually needed to be successful there. One of them is our own health, personal health, physical health, mental health, spiritual health, all of those things. Okay, that's one. Another is relationships, whether that's a spouse or significant other or a partner, whatever it might be. That's 2. So you got 2 right there. So you've got between 1 and 3 others, right? Maybe you're invested you want to make music. You love making music. So music is your hobby. It's one of your main priorities. Maybe you've got kids and you want to be there for your kids. You want to be at all the soccer games and all the ballet recitals, right? You have to define those priorities. So that's the first thing that you've got to do. So if you say, well, I don't have 4 to 6 hours a week, the first thing that I'd encourage you to do is evaluate your priorities. Okay, because we can get really swept up in what I call drift. So drift is just allowing life to kind of push you around instead of defining what you're going for very clearly and then going for it and ripping out all the things, all the ancillary items that are distracting you from it. Okay, so define your priorities, evaluate your priorities. The way that you can do that is tell me where you spend your time and tell me where you spend your money. Right? If you're spending all of your money going out to eat, food is probably important to you. Right? If you're spending all of your time up at the baseball fields, your kiddo playing baseball is probably important to you. Look at your schedule and look at your income and your expenses. That will help tell you what your priorities are. Okay? Now, looking at those things, define what your top 3 to 5 priorities are. Once you define those, you can now say, are those actually the priorities that I want? Are those the priorities that are going to help me get to the end state that we want to be at? You, yourself, your spouse, whatever it might be. Where are we going? And are these goals these priorities going to help us get there? If not, you need to adjust your priorities. But if you say, my priorities are straight on the money, they're accurate for where I want to be, and I just don't have the time to be putting into real estate. I don't have this 4 to 6 hours a week. You've got one main method, one main model that you can use. You can do turnkey properties. Now, when I say turnkey, you might also hear this as buy and hold. This means 20% down. So you've got to show up to a property. First, you got to identify the property. And there's an art and science to finding the right market as well that's oriented towards cash flow. But once you find that property, you got to find the property, then you've got to show up with 20% down. So if this is a $200,000 house, you got to show up with $40,000. If this is a $100,000 house, you got to show up with $20,000 plus probably a little bit for closing, right? $2,000 to $3,000 for closing. Okay, so this strategy is helpful for people that are time constrained, but they might have some money, right? So if you find a $100,000 house and you've got $25,000 and you want to trade it in for $400 a month cash flow long term, that's fine. That's totally fine. It will be slower, but it gets you moving in the right direction. Okay, so let's say you just do a house a year and you get $400 a month cash flow. In 4 years, you're at $1,600 a month, right? And that could also just be a quadplex or a triplex. You can scale in different forms, but it's going to take a little bit longer. You're not going to be able to move as quickly. Okay, so but you still got to carve out the time to find a property, right? And run the numbers and understand what those numbers are going to be. If you still don't even have the time for that, then what I recommend is you find a partner. And what this is essentially you would be one side of the equation. They would be the operational side. You bring the money, they bring the knowledge, the know-how, and the boots on the ground. So they're actually finding the deals, sourcing them, curating them, and bringing them to you for you to then say, yes, I'll do that one. Okay, that partner, what they bring to the table is valuable to you. What you bring to the table is valuable to them. But what they're not going to do is do it for free. Right? So you're probably going to have to give up some equity and cash flow in a situation like this. So you would bring the money, they would bring the deal because they have the expertise and boots on the ground that frankly, you don't have. So if this is something that you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me. I have people all the time that are saying, hey, I want somebody with the knowledge and experience to actually be able to do this, but I don't have the time. I'm happy to make that connection. So that's the time constraint. If time is your constraint, you've got really one of two options: turnkey properties, or if you're very time constrained, partnering with somebody. Okay, so that's time. The second is money. If you're money constrained, first you've got to step back and try and understand what your assumptions have been. A lot of people are saying, I don't have enough money to get started in real estate because I'm not a millionaire, or I don't have a lot of money. I don't have 6 figures sitting to the side. And what they've assumed is I've got to have 20% down for the average or median property in my area. So if you live in a larger metro area, that could be, median home price could be $450,000. That means 20% down, you're going to have to come to the table with almost $100,000. And some people have assumed that's the order of magnitude of money that they need to get started in real estate. And that is not the case. Okay? You might not even need 5 figures. What you do need, in my opinion, is what I call confidence money. Confidence money is essentially protection for you. And it's not physical protection, it's more psychological protection. This number is going to be different for everybody. I've had students start with literally nothing. In fact, I've got one student right now, started with nothing, and after 3 months has 6 doors. There's a way to make that happen. So if you say, I'm comfortable doing that, I'm going to bet on myself, that's great. You can do that. But if you say, I would really like to have $5,000 or $10,000 in just available and accessible, not earmarked for real estate, but just available and accessible to protect me in case something goes wrong. right? That's what confidence money is. It doesn't have to be set aside for real estate. It just needs to be accessible. In the case that, say, you did a BRRRR and you ended up having to leave about $5,000 in because it was going to cash flow $500 a month, that would be reasonable. That would actually be a good decision, right? But you've got to be able to get to the point where you can actually make that decision. And in order to do that, you've got to get over some psychological barriers to be able to move forward. So this is going to look different for everybody. What I recommend is somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 that's accessible to you. Doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean that it's earmarked for real estate. It just means that you can access it if you are in a pinch. Okay, and that's confidence money. So if you're at that point where you say, I've got the confidence money, whether it's low or high, whatever's right for you, I've got the confidence money, and money is actually constrained. I'm not walking around with $200,000, $300,000 that I could do turnkeys, but I actually have some time, then you want to choose low or no money down models. And there's a number of low or no money down models that would be really helpful for people in your situation. One of them we've talked about before. If you haven't seen this live cast or video, go back and watch How to Buy a House with $0. This is the BRRRR model. It stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. Essentially what you're doing here is you're flipping a house, and instead of selling and kicking out the equity into your pocket, you're using that equity as your 20% down payment for the bank. And you're going to refinance into a long-term 30-year amortized fixed rate mortgage. Okay, so that's the BRRRR model. The next option would be something called owner financing, or you might have heard it called seller financing. This is where instead of engaging with a bank at all, the owner of the house that you're buying from, they act as your bank. So they sell you the house, the name on the deed formally transfers, and they act as the bank. So the nice part about this is you're able to determine the terms that you want that are advantageous to both of you. So if they care more about cash flow, they don't really care about interest, you might be able to pay them a higher monthly payment in exchange for zero interest or principal only payments, right? And then at some point, what you're likely going to do is say after 48 months, that will be the term of the loan, and then you've got to pay them off the rest at that point. At which point you can refinance into a longer term product. You can refinance into, say, a traditional conventional loan or a commercial loan oriented towards single family residential or whatever property you purchased. So that's owner financing. The ways that you're going to find that are direct to seller. That's the hard part, is getting in contact with an actual individual that can finance this is difficult because, one, it's hard to find that person, and two, they've got to own the property outright. So they can't have any mortgages on it. That would be a different model, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So the way that you're going to get in touch with these people primarily are what's called direct to seller. So you would mail them something, or you'd leave them a voicemail, you'd give them a text or an email. You get into their communication stream, and you say, hey, I'm interested in buying your property, and you have a conversation with them about it. The other would be what's called driving for dollars. So you drive around your community. This does restrict you to where you live, and you find a house that might not be in great shape, or you think they might sell that to me. And at that point, you either go knock on the door or you give them a call and you ask them if you can buy that property and see if they'll finance it. That's owner financing. Another option, one of the other three main low or no money down options, is called subject to. Subject to financing is very similar to owner financing or seller financing, with the one caveat that the property still has a mortgage on it. It's got a note on it. So what you do is you, in exchange for taking over the mortgage payments, you pay them. Or in some circumstances, they might even pay you to take over the mortgage payments. And you take over those notes, that note, the mortgage on the property, in exchange for getting the house. So that's what subject to is. You're essentially just taking over the mortgage on their behalf. Now, there are some non-passive income creating low or no money down models like flipping or wholesaling, but our goal, again, is passive income. It's cash flow within our constraints. All right. So this constraint being money, the main options that you've got are the BRRRR model, owner financing, and subject to. So now that we've got an understanding of where our strategy is, we need to be able to determine and discern between good and bad. Not just say, well, that looks like a good deal. I mean, God, I had a conversation with someone recently that lives up in Portland, and they wanted cash flow out of their property. And what they did was they went and bought a $350,000 house that they said they were going to use as a short-term rental. And I said, okay, well, what's your cash flow going to be? What are your end numbers on this? And she said, I don't know. So she was bought in enough to understand that real estate was really valuable, but didn't have the knowledge or understanding to be able to know whether or not that was actually going to help her meet her goal. And so you can't afford to do that. As an investor, you can't rely on other people either for your number one decision, right? You can't just rely on an experienced investor to tell you whether or not it's a good deal because one, you've got to be able to make a decision reasonably quickly when you find a good deal, right? And you can't rely on somebody else and their timeline to get back to you. Two, it's your money. So if they make a bad decision, they don't really care. They might be making a decision just because they're time constrained and say, yeah, that's a good deal. Then you go buy it and it's your money on the line, right? It's your money, so you've got to make sure that it's a good investment. So you have to know how to determine between good and bad. And the way you're going to do this is by knowing two numbers that make up just one metric. So we're going for one metric that's made up out of two numbers. The two numbers that we care about help us make a logical decision. This decision as to whether or not a deal is good or bad is not an emotional decision. It's one based on logic. It's a math decision. Okay, you're going to make a decision that you have ahead of time determined this is what I consider good and this is what I consider bad. Okay, and we need these numbers to be able to do this. So, in order to be able to make that smart, well-informed decision, you've got to know ahead of time what those numbers are going to be. Okay, and if it passes that litmus test, it's a good property. If the numbers are worse, that's bad. Okay, so those two key numbers are cash flow and cash required, or out-of-pocket cash required. Okay, so cash flow is answer the question, how much money am I going to make on a monthly basis after expenses? Now, you've got some people walking around out there that say, I'm cash flowing $900 on my single family property that costs $80,000. No, they're not, right? The reason they say that is because it sounds much better. What they're really saying is, after my rent and after I take in the rent and I pay off my mortgage, I have $900. Really, they're probably cash flowing about $400 a month. Because after expenses means you've taken out property management fees, insurance, taxes, and then you've saved for expenses that are going to happen, like maintenance, vacancy, and capital expenses. So things that are over $1,000, say a roof or HVAC system or foundation issues. You've saved for those. And after that, you've got this $400 a month, right? That's what I mean by cash flow. Actual walking around money after expenses. Cash required is what it sounds like. It's the actual money out of your pocket that you've got to leave in the deal. Now, what I'm not talking about is the front end of a BRRRR. I'm talking about after you refinance, how much have you had to leave in the deal, if any, right? The goal with a BRRRR is to not have any money out of your pocket. But if you get into a situation where you say, it would be worth it for me to leave this money in to get that property, that's fine. What we're going to talk about is a metric to be able to allow you to do this. So what you need is these two numbers in order to give you one metric. And this metric, this one metric, will be able to tell us whether or not it's good or bad, a good or bad deal. That metric is called cash on cash return. So some of you may be familiar with this, but cash on cash return is a type of ROI, or return on investment. You might see it abbreviated COC ROI. Return on investment just says, of the money that I put in, how much did I get back? Right? If it's 100% ROI, I put in $1,000, I get back $1,000. Cash on cash return time bounds that. It gives it a discrete time frame, right? Because we're seeking passive income, right? It's not just a stock where we say I invested $1,000 and I made $1,000. 100% time, 100% ROI. We're looking at cash on cash return. This is a product of the amount of money that you spent to get into the deal and how much you make. Okay, so what the question it answers is, of the money that I left in the deal, how much am I going to make over the next 12 months? So if you leave $5,000 in a deal, you need to know how much am I going to make back of that in the next 12 months after I close on this deal. Okay, so the way that you're going to calculate this is your cash flow number multiplied by 12, because we're calculating cash flow in months, right? Monthly cash flow. So we're going to multiply that by 12 to get it in a yearly form. And then we're going to divide that by the cash required to be in the deal. Okay. Again, this is not an emotional decision. This is math, right? We've got to understand what our bounds are and define what our bounds are before we go into this situation. So you've got to define them ahead of time. So what I want to do is I'm going to tell you what my targets are, what my bounds are for I'm not doing that deal. That's not a good deal for me. And what I would say, that's a thumbs up, that's a green light. Okay. So if you are time constrained and you're doing the turnkey method, my target is 20% or better. 20% cash on cash return or better. That means of the money that I put in, I will make that back in 5 years. Okay? So think about it this way. Let's say you find a $100,000 property. You put 20% down on that property. You're going to have some ancillary costs, but let's just simplify it and say you're all in $20,000. Because 20% of $100,000, 20 grand. And you're going to make $400 a month after expenses. What that comes out to is $4,800 in the next 12 months, right? So we take that $4,800 and we divide it by $20,000, and that gives us 24%. If those were the numbers that I was running, I would do that deal. That's a good deal in my mind. Most turnkey investors are looking for between 10 and 20%. I want 20% or better because I want to either be able to understand that a property is undervalued, or I want to be able to get in at a situation where I'm actually buying low because someone needs to sell quickly. So I'm buying low so that I can put myself in a competitive position long term. So I want to be better than the 10 to 20%. Okay, so 24% is what that example would be. I just want 20% or better. All right, now if you are not time restricted, but you're money restricted, and you're going to do a model that's a low or no money down model like the Burr model. For me, my goal is after refinancing, so not on the front end, but long term, over the lifetime of that Burr, after you refinance, 3 or 4 months in, I want to have a 60% cash on cash return or better. So of all the money that I put into this deal, I want 60% back in the next 12 months. So if I leave $10,000 in a deal, I need $6 grand back that year. All right. So for example, let's say similar property, I Burr it, I buy it for $60,000, put 10 grand into it, and then it reappraises at $100,000. And I make $400 a month. Again, that's the same, that's $4,800 a year, almost $5,000. But I've got to, when I refinance, let's say my ARV isn't as high as my normal deals would be. So I've got to leave $8,000 in this deal. Now the question is that a good deal? Essentially what I'm saying is I'm going to trade $8,000 in my pocket right now for $4,800 a year. That's the question we're answering. In that situation, that would be $4,800 divided by $8,000. That's 60%. And again, with the Burr, the goal is to have no money out of your own pocket. That's an ideal situation. So that would be 100%, even up to infinite return, because you wouldn't have any money out of your pocket, which is the denominator in that equation, right? So ideally, it's 100% or better, but 60% or higher is what I shoot for. Those are my goals. So if I'm running analysis on a property I'm about to buy and it's turnkey and it's at 14%, I say that's not worth it because I can make more money somewhere else, right? If the other, let's say it was a Burr property and it came out to be 50%, that's just not worth it for me either. That's the line that I draw in the sand. So ahead of time, I've said if I'm doing a turnkey, 20% is what I shoot for. And if I'm doing a Burr, 60% is what I shoot for. Anything below that is what I say, that's a bad deal for me. So this is something that you've got to determine for yourself. If you're just starting out, you might want to be a little bit flexible with these numbers. Get your first property under your belt just so that you can get moving. Okay. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to help. Reach out to me. But once you define these numbers for yourself, again, has to be ahead of time so that it's not an emotional decision. You'll be able to tell what is a good deal and what's a bad deal. Because once you know cash on cash return and what your metrics are for turnkey or whatever model you're using, you can then define that as good or bad so that it simplifies and de-emotionalizes the entire decision-making process. So you can know concretely, this is either a good deal or a bad deal. So I hope that was helpful for you. Again, thank you so much for joining this week's live webinar. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments or put them in the group so that we can collaborate. If you want to talk about something specific, if you want me to talk on the live webinar or in a different session, if you want me to talk about something specific, leave those in the comments or put that in the group as well and let me know. I'm happy to put together content that's most helpful for you guys. If you want to get in touch with me personally, you can check out my website at blakeshwanet.com, www.blakeshwanet.com, to learn more and see how I work with people. So thanks for coming. We'll see you guys next week.